Okay, thank you all. I would like to welcome the leader of our next panel, Mr. Kremlis, former advisor to the Greek Prime Minister and Honorary Director of the EC, member of the board of the EPLO.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to invite the members of the panel here present to join me, Kyria Synodinou and Mr. Spyridakis. The two other members of the panel will be connected online. I'm Kremlis, as presented by the President. I have the pleasure and the privilege to be the moderator of this panel of distinguished speakers on redefining the energy landscape towards a net zero era. A very important panel, as currently we are in the energy transition phase with a milestone by 2030 as regards the reduction by 55% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Another milestone which has been added by the Greek climate law, an ambitious piece of legislation to reduce by 80% by 2040. This is a milestone which is not foreseen by the EU legislation, the regulation on climate of the European Union, and ultimately the final net zero milestone by 2050. So the purpose of this panel is to see how this energy transition is developing, to what extent the targets are achievable, what can we do to boost the energy transition, and ultimately to reach the final goal, which is the goal of the carbon neutrality. So I would like, without ado, to say two words and then give the floor to the first speaker. From the Green Deal, we have moved to REPowerEU. The ambitious targets and the high level of ambition has been affected by the energy crisis, by the war, and in that respect, REPowerEU has been a tool to boost this transition, which has taken time to be developed as it was influenced by the energy crisis and the war, to be taken into, of course, to be taken into consideration. And then it is important to also highlight the dimension that I was discussing with the ambassador a while ago, of how through new technologies and innovation we can boost the energy transition. And in that respect, we're lagging behind in the European Union. We start now discussing the critical raw materials, but bear in mind that in the United States, the IRA has been developed, which is a powerful financial and I would say incentives framework to boost innovation in the war, and I put this in inverted commas, with China, as China now holds all the technologies, not only in terms of critical raw materials, which are extremely important for renewable energy sources and storage in particular, but also as regards the quality of all the products and the devices which will boost the energy transition. So the floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome everyone here today. I am actually the Deputy Director of the C2 Directorate. I have another ambassador on top of me, older. So just for the record. Now, this is a very interesting panel because this is a subject that is both short-term and long-term. The ultimate goal of the EU is to reach what we call the net zero decarbonization by 2050. There are some intermediate goals, of course, that you know from the 5 interlocking proposals that are currently being implemented, and they are mostly in the regulatory environment. So we have, as Mr. Kremlis mentioned, the European Green Deal, the Fit for 55, the Repower EU plan in order to reduce the dependency of the EU on fossil fuels coming from Russia, the EU Green Industrial Plan, and the set of reforms which were proposed by the European Commission for the redesign of the power market. And this is, and on this last item, I would just like to mention briefly that Greece has been a very positive actor in this grid redesigning. So the key objectives of, very briefly, of the EU to reach this net zero is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, of course, increasing energy efficiency, promoting renewable energy sources, and enhancing energy security. And these objectives are important in order to combat the devastating effects that we have seen of climate change, and that will most likely continue, to create a sustainable energy system and to reduce the EU dependency on fossil fuels. So, in a nutshell, although the EU has been very active in the recent years and actually a leader in climate action and renewable energy deployment, with all these initiatives that I mentioned in the regulatory environment, it still lacks a long-term clean tech investment plan. This is the big issue. And I mean, it always goes back to the issue of money, yes? It's the investment dilemma. How do you mobilize public sources, financial resources through EU funds, but also how do you bring in also the private sector, which has a lot of requirements and has to determine the level of risk for each investment. And these are this is very important for the EU to remain competitive, because, as you know, we operate in a multipolar world. We have other countries that don't have all the limitations that are from the EU, whether financial or due to the fact that we are a union of different states. So in terms of coordination, it's more difficult. And we have the risks which are linked to the energy security, the so-called energy trilemma, energy security, sustainability, and affordability. You remember the energy crisis, the high energy prices, the risk of energy supply shortages, and the increasingly more frequent climate change emergencies. So there's also a very important a subject which is maybe not familiar to all of you, but it's what we call EU taxonomy. So it's the classification by the EU in the context of the Green Deal of all investments that are promoting actually the path towards the net zero area. So you need to have a close cooperation there between, for instance, transmission and distribution system operators, which are critical for energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Spyridakis, for this first introduction. Listening to you, I was thinking about how hydrogen, but I leave this for the discussion, can influence this transition, because we still need oil. Gas under the taxonomy has benefited from an extension as regards new gas power plants by 2035. Nuclear is considered to be a sustainable, I put this in inverted commas, source of energy. The penetration of renewables, of course, is extremely important, and we have a target of 80% in our country by 2030, and it is to be seen to what extent this can be achieved, as we do not still have the special energy plans which are needed both at national and local level. Therefore, the the context is a moving context in which we need to have more clear ideas, and moreover, there are emblematic projects which are being developed. For example, the Gregi project to bring green energy from Egypt, other important projects, Eurasia, the new discussion again on East Med with a view to developing this gas pipeline to a dual pipeline, bringing also hydrogen in the future. So a lot of interesting discussions. Without ado, I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Dimitris Tsitouridis, who is connected with us from Brussels. Welcome, Dimitri. Dimitri is a policy officer in DG Energy European Commission, and in his short statement, he will give us, let's say, the key elements of the developing energy policy at EU level in the light of the recent developments. Dimitri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kremlis. Good morning to everyone from Brussels. Many thanks to the organizers for the kind invitation to discuss about the energy landscape towards a net zero era. Let me first express my sympathy, of course, for the people affected by the terrible floods again yesterday in Volos. It's yet another very sad reminder that the climate crisis is already here. Now, I remember a year ago, in October 2022, I was participating in a conference, and I started my remarks by saying that 1 year ago, only a few would have believed the difficult situation we were in with respect to the energy sector following Ukraine's invasion by Russia. We could argue the same thing for today. Only a few could have believed a year ago that in 2023, the European Union would be in a much better place than last year. As you said, I will try to give a summarized overview of what the Commission has been doing recently and what are the next milestones to look forward to. So the Commission's top priority from the beginning of this mandate is the European Green Deal and its commitment to at least 55% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2050. This is our growth and competitiveness agenda, which has been significantly reinforced through the REPowerEU plan. To align EU laws with our 55% climate target by 2030, the Commission adopted 12 legislative proposals under the Fit for 55 package. This includes revision of the renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy performance in buildings directives. Ambitious targets have been agreed by the co-legislators for renewables, 42.5% of final energy consumption by 2030, and energy efficiency, energy reduction of 11.7% in 2030 compared to 2020. And it also includes, among others, the hydrogen and decarbonized gas markets package and the regulation to reduce methane emissions in the energy sector. So there can be no doubt that the EU responded immediately to the energy crisis, adopting, as you mentioned earlier, the REPowerEU plan in order to reduce urgently our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. The REPowerEU plan is not only our energy strategy, but it is also about our competitiveness and sovereignty. The plan is based on 3 pillars: focus on energy savings and efficiency, firstly; secondly, accelerate further the green transition and the rollout of renewable energy; and thirdly, ensure diversification of our energy supplies. Today, we can already see tangible results from our actions. First of all, as recalled by President von der Leyen in her State of the Energy of the Union speech 2 weeks ago, even though price volatility remains, the effectiveness of the measures taken are reflected on the energy prices. The price for gas in Europe was over 300 euros per megawatt hour 1 year ago. It is now around 35. To mention indicatively some additional good news, since May 2022, the gas demand reduction measures have been effective. There has been an 18% reduction between August and March 2023, equivalent to 53 BCM of gas. The prolongation of this temporary measure until March 2024, agreed by the Council earlier this year, is expected to save an additional 60 BCM in only 1 year. 2022 has seen a record of renewable energy deployment and generation in Europe. We have added around 55 gigawatts of new renewable energy to the grid, 16 gigawatts wind and 41 gigawatts solar. In 2022, wind and solar together generated 22% of EU's electricity, overtaking natural gas for the first time. In line with that trend, and as reported, the 10th of September 2023 was an important and symbolic day for the energy transition in Greece. Green electricity production increased to record levels, and for 10 consecutive hours, renewable energy sources covered up to 140% of demand, with a surplus channeled to exports, while lignite participation was zero. Now, regarding the diversification of our supplies, the EU has been successfully replacing Russian gas imports. Since last year, we have imported 61 BCM from Russia via pipelines, a drop of 55% compared to 2021. Russian share of EU gas imports fell from 50% in 2021 to just 8% in 2022, and Norway is now our main supplier through pipelines. Regarding LNG, we have imported 19 BCM from Russia, an increase of 40% compared to 2021, but this is a smaller increase than the rest of the world. Basically, the Russian LNG share has fallen from 20% to 16%, and the EU has become our main LNG supplier with 135 BCM in total. Without getting into technicalities, it is also worth mentioning here that mentioning the EU energy platform and aggregate EU platform, which aim to replace Russian gas supply with two main pillars: a mechanism to aggregate demand and supply, and to coordinate a common outreach with gas suppliers at international level. On storage, the gas storage regulation helped us to reach last year 95% gas filling before the heating season, and we are better prepared to face this winter. By mid-September, our gas storage was already around 94% capacity, reaching our binding target 2 months ahead of schedule. Now, regarding EU funding, overall, around 300 billion euros of EU funding have been made available to support the achievement of the REPowerEU objectives, channeled primarily via the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Most of the member states, including Greece, have submitted the REPowerEU chapters in the context of their recovery and resilience plans, and negotiations are ongoing. For Greece, on top of the approximately 80 billion euros from the RRF, it will be receiving additionally around 800 million euros for its REPowerEU chapter. Allow me here a short parenthesis to mention another important tool that member states have at their disposal, the National Energy and Climate Plans, the NECPs. As you know, the NECPs are setting out the national strategies in view of the 2030 targets, and member states are now in the process of updating them. The majority of the countries have already submitted their updated NECPs, complying or almost complying with the 30th of June deadline, and Greece is one of the remaining member states that haven't submitted yet its NECP, and we look forward to receiving it as soon as possible. Now, what is next? As recently reaffirmed by the President von der Leyen, the energy transition is essential for Europe's future competitiveness. In February 2023, the Commission announced the Green Deal Industrial Plan, as mentioned earlier, to draw a clear strategy of the global competitiveness of our clean tech industry. It includes the Net Zero Industry Act to strengthen the EU's key technology industry and accommodate the Critical Raw Materials Act, supporting value chains required to achieve the energy transition and REPowerEU objectives. These tools will accelerate progress towards the EU's 2030 climate targets and the transition to climate neutrality, boosting in parallel the competitiveness of our industries, creating quality jobs and supporting our efforts to become more energy independent. As also announced by the President, we are now moving forward to propose a European wind power package to further accelerate renewable energy permits, improve energy auctions in member states, strengthen skills, access to finance and stable value chains, and support a series of green transition dialogues with industry. Finally, let me briefly mention our efforts also at the international level, where Europe is leading setting new agreements and targets. For the past weeks and months, we have been working towards an ambitious outcome at the upcoming COP28. Last April, President von der Leyen announced the EU would support global targets for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And in particular, we want to achieve the following: to triple the global renewable energy deployment rate by 2030 from 300 gigawatts to 1 terawatt, and ensure that the vast majority of the new total capacity added is renewable, meaning that fossil fuel capacity deployments are reduced in parallel. And secondly, a global commitment on energy efficiency to double the global energy efficiency improvement rate of this decade compared to the previous one. In conclusion, the last 18 months in Europe have been difficult, suffering a war of aggression on our continent and a global energy crisis. In this context, we have chosen to to increase our green ambition, diversify our energy imports, and accelerate the energy transition. Together with member states, citizens, and industry, we have achieved impressive results, and we must build on this dynamic to continue decarbonizing our economies quickly. However, there's still work to do, of course, but most importantly, it's time for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsitouridis, for this overview of the latest developments at EU level, in particular the initiatives on clean tech, on hydrogen. And in that respect, I would like also to ask where we are with the hydrogen bank, which was also an announcement. This is, let's say, an outstanding issue on which we need to see further what will be the further steps. I would like now to give the floor to the next speaker, Ms. Antigoni Synodinou, Executive Director of Transformation in EYDAP, the Greek water company of Attica, the largest one, for a short, let's say, first statement on the nexus, an extremely important nexus, energy, water, water, energy. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I am glad to be here with you in this interesting conversation. Actually, energy and net zero transition means a lot for water industry. It's not an ESG requirement, but also it's a strategy to reducing our OPEX, the cost we pay for the energy we consume. What I want to mention is that water supply and energy consumption are totally interrelated. I mean that we use energy in our operation, in all stages of our operation and in auxiliary processes. We use energy for the pumping station in the water supply network and sewage network, also for the process in water treatment units and water and sewage treatment plants. Also, we use energy for the buildings and the transportation. Generally speaking, for water companies, the energy cost is about 25% of the OPEX. You understand that after the energy crisis and the recent significant increase of the prices, of the tariffs in energy, we have almost double cost in our energy expenses, which reflects, of course, the financial reports. This is an issue not only, this is an issue, of course, for the water industry totally, I mean, all over the world, but here in Greece, of course, we have here in EYDAP a problem. It's a critical issue for our OPEX. Last year, we paid about 40 million euros for energy, which is double from what we paid 3 years before. And I think that I know that the problem is also significant for the other companies in Greece, for other utilities, smaller utilities in all over the country. Therefore, moving to net zero is equally important as a strategic ESG goal, because, okay, it's an environment prerequisite, but also it's a strategy for reducing the cost. Also, the society benefits from both higher quality and lower cost, of course, of water tariffs. And in EYDAP, we have a goal. We consider to provide zero carbon footprint clean tap water within 10 years.
This is an extremely important and
Yes,
ambitious
it's an ambitious,
target.
yes.
We are all supporting it in the sense that this will be a major milestone in boosting the energy transition and reaching carbon neutrality.
It's ambitious, but I think it's achievable.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. I see the time is flying, so I'm really grateful to you as you have made a very concise and accurate presentation. The last speaker is Mr. Apostolos Petropoulos, who is energy modeler of the International Energy Agency. You are most welcome. The floor is yours for a very short first statement. I see that 10 minutes are only left, and I would like us to have the possibility to have at least one question for each of you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. From Paris, many thanks also to organizers for the invitation. So I will start a little bit about talking on the global energy landscape and where we stand today. If we take a step back, we see that we are just going out from a big energy crisis. But today we have two main worrying signs. First of all, scientists are warning that 2023 maybe is the warmest year ever recorded. Also, CO2 emissions we see to grow. But on the other side, there is optimism in the table. We see a big growth on investments. Already previous speakers talk about how important it's investments. So today we have $1.8 trillion investments on clean energy technologies. This is a 40% increase compared to 2 years ago. On the other side, we have two main technologies that are going to contribute in order to achieve all the different carbon energy pledges across the globe, not only for the EU, but also US, China, and other developing countries. First, it is, of course, solar. We see cost competitiveness of solar. It's just convert this technology to become the new king on the power system. Second, it's EVs. If we look the current EV sales, we are heading about 1 million electrical sales globally at a monthly level today, and this is what we had in 2017 on the whole year. So all these elements bring some optimism on the table, but in order to answer the key question, what is needed in order to reach the climate goals and to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, not only for the EU that we're focusing mainly today, but also on the global level, we need, first of all, to invest even more. By 2030, the goal is to reach around $5 trillion investments of clean energy technologies. This is 2.5 times increase compared to today's level. On top of that, this has to be translated to a big reduction of fossil fuel demands. Fossil fuel demands are translated directly to CO2 emissions, and we are heading for a decline about 25% versus to today's level. How this is going to happen? Investments and scale up of manufacturing capacity, plus policies in place. Already, before we talk about hydrogen, and we see a lot of progress is going to happen, but if we take on board all the different targets from manufacturers, we see that are heading around 50% compared to what is needed to be done for 2030. So once again, additional money are needed to be directed on this direction, plus policies to be in place in order to advocate more the penetration of renewables. And just a final point, we are moving from a system that it's heavily relied on fossil fuels to a system where the critical minerals would be the dominant demand there. Just today, we have our first ever critical mineral summit in our headquarters in Paris. We have over 400 participants, around 50 ministers are participating on the event, just to give you a sense about how important and how all the communities plus the governments have recognized about the role of critical minerals in order to supply this clean energy future. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petropoulos. Let me start with the first question to you. Are you optimistic that the 2030 targets, the 2040 for Greece, and ultimately the 2050 target of net zero are achievable. You have pointed out the lack of financial resources, something that the ambassador has also stressed. Can you, in 1 minute, I'm sorry for the scarcity of time, reply to this question? I mean, are you optimistic that at least within the EU, can we achieve the targets, the ambitious targets that we have set?
Thank you for that question. I think if we see what it has happened in the EU over the last 5 years, I will say there is a big penetration of renewables and electrification on transportation that takes in place. So from this aspect, optimism, it has to be there. So yes, I do believe that the targets are achievable. So it's still, we are narrowing the gap, but still the door is open to reach this target. But what we need to keep in mind is that, first of all, there is quite a long time on the legislation process. So it's a really particularity of the EU that it takes long time policies to be translated in law and then to start the action. And the second time is that the rollout of the infrastructure that is needed, there are high leading times. EU has already recognized that. For this reason, they have changed the regulation, for example, for the grids enhancement on this end. But once again, early action plus support from governments in order to direct and mobilize investments on these directions are key in order to catch up the goals. And on top of that, we need to keep in mind that we are in a game that there are also other countries in place. And if we want our industry to be advanced and really to move forward on this clean energy transition, we need to move fast.
Yes, indeed, we are not on our own. We also have the upcoming COP28, to which Mr. Tsitouridis has referred. And the reply to my question brings me to Mr. Tsitouridis, who has referred to the ESEC, το Εθνικό Σχέδιο για την Ενέργεια και το Κλίμα, the National Plan for Energy and Climate. Currently, it is under public consultation with the view to be finalized and be communicated to the European Commission. I do believe that all these plans need to be updated to take on board the developments that have occurred both at the legislative level and more broadly. So would you like to react on this very briefly, and how would you see the new ESEC, let's say, being up to date and able to meet the challenges and the targets as regards Greece? You have 59 seconds.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question. Absolutely. I mean, as mentioned in my remarks earlier, the NECPs are an essential tool that member states have at their disposal towards net zero. By the 30th of June 2023, member states were expected to submit the draft updated NECPs. The first ones were submitted in 2019. And these updated NECPs need to reflect the increased ambitions and the significantly changed circumstances in the energy sector following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Receiving the plans soon, as soon as possible, is essential because once the plans are submitted, the Commission will assess them individually and issue country-specific recommendations by the end of 2023. It will also assess whether the EU is collectively on track to meet the new 2030 climate and energy targets. The majority of the member states have submitted their updated NECPs on time or almost on time, but some still haven't, and this is the case of Greece. Once submitted, and once the Commission will make the recommendations, member states will then submit the final updated NECP by the 30th of June 2024, taking into account those recommendations. And we are still expecting the Greek plan in order to properly assess it. We have seen some documents. It's covered in the press, but we haven't seen it officially. And it goes without saying that the Commission is in close contact with all member states and with Greece all these past months to assist them in this process and ensure they comply with their legal and political commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tsitouridis. Ms. Synodinou, EYDAP has a very ambitious agenda. We are also grateful to you as you have provided know-how and support in combating and adapting as regards the floods, and your expertise and know-how is extremely important. Do you feel that the financial resources that the EYDAP has, because the human resources are there and we acknowledge them, are sufficient? And how would you see this? Because it is true that because of the climate crisis, there will be a water scarcity in the future. And there will be desalination needs. And desalination requires energy. And it doesn't require hydrocarbons energy, it requires RES energy, green energy. So can you react on this? As you see, we are out of time, but you have 1 minute to shortly react on this, please.
Actually, of course, we are exploiting all available state grants and financial tools for to execute our program, our strategic program for the transition to net zero. Desalination, as you said before, is of course an option. But in Attica, here in Attica, we haven't yet, let's say, examined exactly the need for desalination, since we have the aqueduct from Mornos to Athens, which is sufficient for the moment. And as we can, according to the information we have, for the coming future, there is no, let's say, worry for water scarcity right now or for the coming years here in Attica. Although, of course, desalination and maybe other new technologies should be considered, and should be considered soon, because, as you said before, time is running and technology running faster than we can adapt it.
Thank you very much, and I wish to EYDAP all the best. Ambassador, you are the last for, let's say, a final remark. Probably two elements. One, will the financing in Greece for the energy transition, because of all these new financial obligations as a result of the climate crisis, will be sufficient? And to what extent this needs to be updated also through the ESEC, and how, probably in the same reply, new technologies, not only at EU level, but also within Greece, can be developed. Let me say, for example, that the solar panels, to give you an example, of the first generation, have now reached the end of their life. So we need to introduce them in the circular economy. And I would like to say that without the emblematic model of the circular economy, we will never reach climate neutrality, because promoting RES, cutting the emissions is not enough. We need to change substantially our production and consumption patterns. So very shortly.
Yes, very shortly. What we need in Greece is a change of paradigm. We need to basically tackle all these problems in what we call a holistic approach, meaning that all the ministries have to meet regularly, because, for instance, energy is linked to transport, and it's also linked to the energy, transport, and environment are three, if you want, ministries that are very closely linked together. So in order to tackle these issues, we need to change the paradigm. Clearly, the public sector is not ready to operate yet at this level. Another thing is energy diplomacy, very important. There, Greece has a lot of advantages and competitive advantages, because it has already some ongoing projects with some neighboring countries, especially in the area of electrical grids. For instance, I'm thinking about Egypt, the Gregi interconnector, but also there's another project on the table, which is called the Green Aegean, and it's about connecting Greece through with Central Europe through the electricity grids. This is something also Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has been very vocal about the need for collective grid investments. So, of course, these are all very good, all these projects, but you need to have on board the private sector. But the private sector, as you know, operates also with the cost-benefit analysis. So this, I would say, for Greece, the first thing is like we need to create a sort of task force for this. And secondly, at the EU level, there's clearly a lack of governance, and we need to tackle this. The Commission has to deal with this because otherwise we need to see some countries, for instance, Germany, that has shifted now from the natural gas and is investing massively in hydrogen. So every country has a certain amount of fiscal depth, and Greece doesn't have the same amount of fiscal depth that Germany has, or France has, or even Spain has, which is very advanced in RES. So I think we need some, in order to avoid duplication or to create, let's say, cross-border investment projects to connect all the EU. We clearly need some better governance. And this leads me to the final about the Net Zero Industrial Act, which is supposed to be, you know, the very important, the latest one in the architecture of the EU. It also needs to be revised according to a lot of experts, because there are certain areas that are need some more refining. And remember, we have, as Mr. Kremlis mentioned, we are dealing with China, which is already about to take 15% of the electrical vehicle markets because they have unlimited supply to critical raw materials. We have India also, which is going to become a major player. And of course, we have the United States, which have the Inflation Reduction Act. Basically, in a nutshell, we need a European Marshall Plan for the transition to the net zero era. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. There will be a Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Ukraine. That will be the other channel, but it's not part of our panel. Just to conclude, before thanking the speakers, I would like to say we need circular economy and its full implementation within the EU and in Greece. We need to extend our grid. It's extremely important because if we bring green energy from Egypt and from Israel in the future, etc., we need to be able to benefit from a pan-European network and, of course, to develop our storage capacity. We need also to develop our gas storage. Currently, we are using Chirin in Bulgaria, and we need also to develop carbon capture storage. We had this possibility in Kavala. Why use the possibilities in Bulgaria for carbon capture storage? So there are a lot of challenges ahead, and of course we need to consider desalination for the islands. You are perfectly right. For Attica, we have, and also to see how we can exploit rainwater, because rainwater is flooding into the sea. It leads to erosion. There are techniques which one needs to consider, and I know that there are some ideas in EYDAP, because EYDAP is also a think tank, and we need to develop your expertise. So I would like to thank the four speakers. Unfortunately, the time was limited. It's not my mistake. The previous panel has taken more time. And I hope you will not blame me to announce that the coffee break will be only of 5 minutes. It is up to the organizers to see if gracefully they will give you 5 minutes more. Thank you very much for your attention.